What if fire is not a destroyer, but a teacher? What if every ending that terrifies us is the beginning the soul secretly asks for? And what if the phoenix, that radiant bird of legend, was never meant to be hunted in the sky at all, but recognized within the hidden chambers of our own becoming? From the dawn of civilization, humanity has painted, carved, and sung of this creature that dies in flame and is reborn in light. It is the story of the universe, told through feathers and fire. The ancients did not invent the phoenix, they remembered it. In ancient Egypt, long before philosophy had a name, the phoenix lived as the Bennu bird, the very soul of Ra, the sun god who sailed across the heavens by day and descended into the underworld by night. When dawn came, Ra was reborn, and so was Bennu, rising from the ashes upon the sacred Benben stone, the mound of creation that first broke the waters of chaos. To the priests of Heliopolis, this was not a fable, but a cosmic equation. Light must die into darkness to know itself again. The phoenix was the voice of that equation, a symbol that life and death are but alternating breaths of the same eternal being. The Greeks carried this wisdom westward and wrapped it in reason. In the scrolls of Herodotus and Pliny the Elder, the phoenix appears as a magnificent eagle glowing with red and gold plumage, dwelling in the east for 500 years before building a nest of myrrh and spices. There, it sets itself aflame, and from its ashes, a new bird rises, carrying the bones of its parent to the temple of the sun. The ritual is beautiful, tragic, and precise, the perfect allegory for the soul's immortality. For the philosophers of Athens, this was not a creature of fantasy, but an emblem of anarchy palingenesia, the necessity of rebirth. They saw in the phoenix a reflection of their own pursuit to burn away ignorance until only pure spirit remains. Further east, China envisioned the Feng Huang, twin essence of yin and yang, the masculine Feng and the feminine Huang entwined in perfect harmony. Unlike the fiery bird of the West, the Feng Huang was a messenger of peace and virtue, descending only when the empire lived in justice. It fed not on flame, but on dew, its colors the spectrum of balance itself. Black for mystery, white for clarity, red for life, and gold for enlightenment. Where the Egyptian Bennu symbolized the sunrise and the Greek phoenix symbolized the fire of transformation, the Feng Huang embodied the stillness that follows illumination. It whispered that true resurrection is not violence, but equilibrium, the moment the soul no longer resists its own becoming. Across the sands of Arabia, storytellers spoke of the immortal bird that builds its pyre in solitude beneath the desert sun. It was said that travelers who found a single feather would be blessed with courage through every trial, for the phoenix's fire was the memory of divine endurance. Even Persian mystics wove its image into their cosmology, calling it the Simur, the bird that nests upon the tree of knowledge at the edge of creation. In its wings were written the secrets of all beginnings and endings. Thus, from Nile to Euphrates, from Indus to Yangtze, the myth traveled not as superstition, but as encoded metaphysics. To rise anew, one must consent to burn. The Romans transformed the phoenix into an imperial emblem. On their coins and banners, it stood for the eternal power of Rome, each emperor promising renewal after the ashes of conquest. Yet even here, behind political pride, the older truth flickered. Every empire that claims eternity must first face its own pyre. The phoenix reminded them that endurance is not stasis, it is perpetual recreation. When the early Christians looked upon that same symbol, they saw in it a foreshadowing of resurrection, the victory of the spirit over the tomb. Thus, the pagan fire became sacred light, and the myth was baptized without losing its flame. Beneath these histories lies an even deeper current, the alchemical principle of transformation. The phoenix is the prima materia set ablaze, the raw substance of being refined through ordeal. Alchemists drew its image upon their manuscripts as a sign that matter and soul share one destiny. The bird's death in fire represented calcination, the burning away of impurity. Its rebirth from ash symbolized the exaltation of essence. From one comes two, from two comes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth, wrote the adepts. An echo of the phoenix's own mystery, self-creation from self-destruction. It is the soul becoming its own philosopher's stone. Every culture, every age, has reinterpreted the phoenix, yet its heart remains unchanged. It is the testimony that renewal is written into existence itself. The stars collapse into novas, forests regrow after flame, civilizations fall and rise again. The phoenix is not myth, but metaphor for the mathematics of being. Energy never dies. It transforms. The ancients intuited this law long before physics named it. They sang it through feathers and fire, telling us that immortality is not endless life, but endless change. Look closely, and you will find the phoenix hidden in plain sight, in church windows and royal crests, in poems of loss and hymns of hope, even in the quiet turning of your own seasons of the heart. Every heartbreak, every failure, every night that seems endless, is the soul's descent into its own ashes. What returns from that darkness is not what perished, but what was purified. The phoenix is the inner law that ensures no flame burns in vain. Thus, when you read of this bird, do not imagine a creature flying through clouds of gold. Imagine instead the burning of the human spirit when it chooses growth over comfort, truth over illusion, love over fear. That is the real phoenix, the consciousness willing to be unmade so it may awaken truer than before. The ancients built temples to it. We build experiences. Every ending you survive is your own resurrection. What if the fire that consumes the phoenix is the same fire that burns unseen inside us? What if the ritual of its death is not a myth about birds, but a coded map of spiritual chemistry? In the temples of Alexandria, the philosophers whispered that every human being carries a hidden furnace. When ignorance is fed into it, wisdom rises as smoke. To the alchemists, that furnace was the heart, and the phoenix was its emblem, the mystery of transformation rendered in living flame. The bird's pyre became a metaphor for the soul's purification through suffering and awakening. Alchemy was never only about metals. Behind the retort and crucible lay the vision that matter and spirit mirror one another. To turn lead into gold was to turn fear into consciousness. The phoenix, radiant in its self-immolation, became the supreme hieroglyph of that process. Its feathers of red and gold were not colors of plumage, but of transmutation, the rubedo, the final stage of the great work. Where common fire destroys, the alchemical fire reveals. It is the fire of awareness, the slow, luminous heat by which the false self burns away. In the texts of Hermes Trismegistus, the secret fire is described as the sun within the stone. It is invisible to the eye, yet felt by the soul. When the alchemist gazes into the vessel and sees vapor rise, he is watching the phoenix ascend. Each dissolution, each calcination, repeats the myth. Death as necessary passage, ash as womb. The initiate learns that nothing is ever truly lost. Form dissolves, essence remains. Thus, the phoenix's cycle becomes the laboratory of consciousness, the formula by which mortality glimpses eternity. Medieval adepts, such as Zosimos of Panopolis and Paracelsus, drew the phoenix atop their manuscripts as a seal of completion. They wrote that when the red bird appears in vision, the work is near its end, for the elements have reconciled and the soul stands purified. To them, the phoenix was both symbol and teacher. Its flight through fire represented the union of opposites, sulfur and mercury, body and spirit, life and death. Every rebirth demanded a burning. Every illumination demanded the courage to enter one's own furnace. Mystics of the Renaissance extended this vision beyond the laboratory into the human psyche. They saw the real secret fire as the divine energy latent in every being, what the Hindus called Kundalini, what the Kabbalists named Shekinah, what the alchemists drew as a phoenix crowned with a halo of stars. When this inner fire awakens, old identities fall like feathers, and the consciousness ascends into clearer air. The legend of the phoenix thus became an interior instruction manual. To rise, you must first consent to burn your limitations. Consider the imagery of the pyre. The phoenix does not flee the flames, it builds them carefully from aromatic woods. So too must the seeker prepare his own fire by gathering his experiences, his attachments, his fears, and offer them to transformation. In that offering lies freedom. What many call destruction is simply the moment when form yields to essence. The ashes left behind are not ruin, they are the salt of wisdom, the crystallized memory of all that was learned through the burning. Throughout the Hermetic schools, teachers warned that the secret fire cannot be forced. When ignited prematurely, it consumes the unready vessel. Patience, purity, and compassion are the true bellows. In the allegory, the phoenix waits centuries before kindling its own demise. Likewise, the soul must mature before enduring its inner conflagration. This is why the ancients measured the bird's life in 500-year cycles, each an epoch of preparation, reflection, and alignment. Only when the spirit is centered can it bear the revelation that follows annihilation. The phoenix also taught the alchemists a paradox, that immortality is not escape from death, but intimacy with it. To live forever is to die continually, without resistance. The adept who understands this walks through life as through successive fires, shedding illusions as the bird sheds feathers. Every failure, humiliation, or heartbreak becomes another pyre in miniature. The wise do not curse the flames, they bless them, for each fire returns them closer to the gold within. Thus the phoenix's gift is endurance, born of surrender. From the catacombs of Europe to the libraries of Persia, the same emblem reappeared, a bird aflame, wings wide, haloed by the sun. To the uninitiated, it was myth. To the mystic, revelation. The secret fire was no longer confined to temples. It moved through art, poetry, and prayer. Dante saw it in Beatrice's eyes, Blake in the energy that is eternal delight. Each rediscovery was another rising. Through centuries of darkness, the phoenix kept humanity's remembrance of inner transformation alive, reminding every generation that the sacred furnace still glows beneath the ash of the world. It ends where all alchemical texts end, with the whisper that the fire is already lit within you. Every fear, every loss, every ending you endure feeds that invisible flame. What the phoenix demonstrates in myth, the soul enacts in silence, self-consumption as renewal, surrender as power. To seek the secret fire is to recognize that you have never truly been separate from it. For the phoenix does not dwell in distant skies. It rises even now in the heart that dares to awaken. Every civilization that ever dreamed of eternity told the same story, though each gave it a different name. The phoenix was never confined to one people or religion. It was a living archetype encoded in the mythic memory of humanity. Its shape shimmered through temples, songs, and stones, as if whispering, "The fire that made the stars still moves through you." To follow the phoenix is to trace the map of our collective soul, a cartography of civilizations that understood creation not as invention, but as resurrection. In the Nile Valley, the Bennu bird's shadow stretched across pyramids and tombs. Priests of Heliopolis taught that when Ra sailed into the underworld, the Bennu followed him as a guide, carrying the spark of dawn through the corridors of night. Each sunrise was a microcosmic rebirth. Each flooding of the Nile mirrored cosmic renewal. The phoenix thus became a manual for time itself, showing that decay was only the pause between breaths of creation. In the hieroglyphs carved upon sarcophagi, the Bennu's feathers unfurl beside the scarab, another emblem of resurrection. Together they declared, "Nothing dies, everything transforms." When this mystery crossed into Greece, philosophy gave it a new vocabulary. The phoenix became the emblem of metempsychosis, the transmigration of souls. To Heraclitus, all things were fire, and change was the only permanence. The phoenix embodied that truth perfectly, a creature whose essence was constancy through transformation. Plato, in his dialogues, compared the immortal soul to this fiery bird, rising through cycles of birth and death toward the divine good. The myth became a theology of light, wrapped in feathers. Through it, the Greeks remembered what Egypt had already sung, that the divine repeats itself through form until form learns it is divine. Beyond the Hellenic world, the myth took on new wings in Persia, where the sages spoke of the Simurgh. Vast, wise, and radiant, this bird nested upon the cosmic tree of knowledge that held the seeds of all creation. In the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings, the Simurgh rescues abandoned heroes, heals wounds, and teaches forgotten wisdom. It represents the divine intelligence that oversees the rise and fall of worlds. Though not a flame, its feathers shimmer with the same principle as the phoenix: knowledge through descent, healing through trial. The Simurgh does not burn, it enlightens. Yet enlightenment itself is a fire that consumes ignorance. Thus the code remains intact, translated into mercy. Travel farther east, and the Feng Huang reigns over the imperial skies of China. Depicted with the head of a golden pheasant and the grace of a crane, it is both male and female, the perfect fusion of duality. The phoenix of the East did not perish in flame, but returned to heaven when disorder stained the earth. Its message was balance, renewal through virtue rather than destruction. Yet beneath this serenity lies the same cosmic pattern. Renewal follows dissolution, peace follows chaos, dawn follows night. The Feng Huang carried in its plumage the 5 colors of the elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, reminding emperors that their rule must mirror the harmony of creation itself. To the Hindus, this pattern was embodied by Garuda, the mighty mount of Vishnu. Fierce and radiant, Garuda consumed serpents, symbols of illusion, and soared between heaven and earth as the vehicle of divine order. While the phoenix died and rose, Garuda conquered and ascended, yet both shared the same principle: liberation through mastery of fire. Garuda's wings spread the sound of the Vedas across the universe, echoing the phoenix's first cry that awakened creation. Whether through self-immolation or righteous flight, the story repeated: the spirit must pass through fire to regain its origin. Among the native tribes of the Americas, especially in the arid lands of the Southwest, tales of the Thunderbird reveal another face of this code. The Thunderbird's wings bring storms, lightning, and rain, the celestial fire that both destroys and nourishes. For them, rebirth was not found in solitary flames, but in the balance of destruction and creation across the land itself. The phoenix's essence traveled even here, disguised as weather and rhythm, showing that renewal is nature's oldest ceremony. When thunder rolls, it is the sky remembering the phoenix's song. Across continents and millennia, this hidden pattern persisted. Scholars call it diffusion. Mystics call it memory. Each culture translated the phoenix into its own vocabulary, but the underlying geometry remained: creation, destruction, renewal, transcendence. It is as if humanity once shared an ancient code, scattered like embers when our ancestors walked separate paths. The myths that survived became the fragments of that code, the same myth, written in different alphabets of flame. The phoenix is the cipher of consciousness, reminding us that we were once one fire, learning to shine through many forms. The occult philosophers of later ages recognized this unity. They saw in the recurrence of the phoenix a proof of perennial truth, a wisdom tradition older than any scripture. They called it Prisca Theologia, the original theology carried from Atlantis, Egypt, and Chaldea into every faith that followed. The phoenix was its guardian sigil. To decode it was to recover the lost knowledge of cyclical creation, the endless dance of spirit and matter. They claimed that each age, when nearing its own collapse, dreams again of the phoenix, as if the collective soul itself prepares to rise through catastrophe. Through this lens, history becomes a sequence of pyres. Civilizations blaze with art and empire, then fall into ash, only to seed the soil for another dawn. The phoenix does not belong to myth alone. It is the pulse of history itself. Every library burned, every city rebuilt, every renaissance born from ruin is the world acting out the same sacred drama. The myth was never meant to comfort, it was meant to prepare. To know the phoenix is to recognize the cyclical heartbeat of creation, whispering beneath every ruin, "Rise again." Yet what few understood is that these civilizations were not merely repeating a story. They were preserving a technology of consciousness. In their temples, the myth of the phoenix encoded initiatory knowledge, describing not only cosmic rebirth, but the process by which a human being could ignite the divine spark within. Beneath their rituals, symbols, and monuments lay the same silent instruction: burn the false to reveal the true. The phoenix was the first manual of transformation, written not in words, but in fire, and those who followed its trail carried its code across the centuries. Deep beneath the sands, where the air grows still and torches flicker like ancient memories, the initiates gathered. They did not come to worship a bird or a god, but to witness the secret that all creation keeps hidden, that fire and resurrection are one. The phoenix was their symbol, their sacred cipher, the silent teacher of the mysteries. To the uninitiated, it was legend. To those who entered the inner chambers of initiation, it was instruction. For the ancients believed that only through death, ritual, symbolic, or spiritual, could the truth of immortality be understood. In Egypt, the great temples of Heliopolis and Abydos were more than sanctuaries. They were laboratories of the soul. There, under the watchful eye of the priests of Ra and Osiris, initiates reenacted the cosmic drama of life, death, and rebirth. They were made to lie within the sarcophagus, not to die, but to be transformed. to descend into the dark underworld of the self and awaken renewed. The phoenix, or Bennu, hung above them as the emblem of this passage. It reminded the seeker that light is born only when one dares to enter darkness willingly, that one must consent to burn before one can shine. The mystery schools of Greece, inheriting these rites from Egypt, echoed the same sacred formula. In Eleusis, the initiates of Demeter and Persephone entered subterranean halls to face the mystery of death and rebirth. They drank the kykeon, a sacred brew said to open the inner vision, and passed through the symbolic underworld, where Persephone's return heralded the triumph of life over decay. Though cloaked in agricultural myth, the ceremony hid the same geometry as the phoenix: descent, dissolution, resurrection. The Hierophant, robed in white, would speak of divine fire sleeping within all living things, waiting to rise from the ashes of ignorance. In the Orphic mysteries, this secret deepened further. Orpheus, the mythical poet, taught that the soul must undergo purification across countless lifetimes until it learns to escape the cycle of birth and death. To his followers, the phoenix was not a symbol of eternity, but of liberation, the final flight beyond reincarnation. In Orphic hymns, the bird's cry is the sound of awakening, the vibration that breaks illusion. Thus, to rise like the phoenix was to remember one's divinity and to be reborn, not in body, but in consciousness. When the torch of knowledge passed into Alexandria, the city where East met West, the phoenix became a synthesis of science, mysticism, and philosophy. In its libraries, the Hermetic texts described man as a mortal vessel filled with immortal fire. Initiation was not worship but awakening, a disciplined art of refining the self. The phoenix adorned these manuscripts as a living equation: spirit equals matter transfigured by light. To rise from ashes was the alchemical formula for rebirth, to dissolve, purify, and reconstitute the soul in its divine essence. Across the sea, the Mithraic mysteries of the Romans carried this flame into hidden sanctuaries beneath the empire's cities. Within these underground temples, initiates reenacted the slaying of the cosmic bull, the act of sacrifice that renews the world. Above the altars burned the image of the phoenix, representing the initiate's resurrection from the animal nature to divine consciousness. The Mithraic priest, robed in red and gold, whispered the same truth spoken in Heliopolis, that to ascend, one must pass through the purifying flame. The fire was not punishment, but promise, the bridge between mortal and eternal. Even the early Gnostic sects drew upon this hidden tradition. They spoke of the Christos as the true phoenix, descending into the tomb of matter to awaken the divine spark within humanity. To the Gnostics, salvation was not escape from the world, but transformation through knowledge. Gnosis, the inner fire of realization. Their writings describe a secret baptism by flame, an illumination that burns away ignorance until only pure awareness remains. Thus, the phoenix transcended myth and became a living doctrine of transfiguration, a pattern woven through religions like a thread of light. In the temples of Persia, initiates of the Magi practiced the rites of the fire mystery. Their eternal flames symbolized the indestructible essence of divine intelligence. To them, the phoenix was the unseen guardian of that flame, the messenger between earth and the sun. When the sacred fires were tended at dawn, they recited verses that declared, "As the bird rises, so shall wisdom ascend." These rituals preserved the ancient covenant between man and the cosmos, that knowledge and fire are one and the same. Through these mysteries, One truth resounded again and again. The phoenix is the initiate's journey made visible. Every descent into shadow, every trial by flame, every symbolic death prepares the soul to bear more light. To rise from ashes is not a miracle reserved for mythic birds, but the inevitable result of awakening consciousness. Each ritual death is a rehearsal for eternity, each rebirth a remembrance of origin. Thus, the initiates of every age have carried the phoenix in their hearts, as torch, as teacher, as proof that the divine within man cannot die. In the sanctuaries of the ancients, surrounded by stone and silence, those who sought truth faced the same revelation. You are the phoenix. Its pyre is your fear. Its fire, your longing. Its rebirth, your remembering. The temples have crumbled, the chants have faded, yet the ritual continues, within every seeker who dares to awaken. For the mysteries were never truly lost. They merely changed form, awaiting rediscovery in a world that has forgotten its fire. And it is in that forgetting that the next chapter begins, where the sacred flame leaves the temples of stone and enters the hidden cathedrals of the soul. When myth leaves the temple and enters the throne room, it changes its language, but not its meaning. The fire that once purified the soul begins to illuminate the banners of kings. The phoenix, that silent emblem of divine renewal, was soon claimed by emperors and conquerors seeking eternity through empire. For rulers understood what mystics had long known. Symbols are power made visible. If the phoenix rose from its own ashes, then a fallen kingdom could too, and those who ruled in its name appeared chosen by the flame itself. In ancient Rome, the image of the phoenix was stamped upon coins, mosaics, and imperial seals. It became the emblem of the eternal city, the promise that Rome would never perish, only renew. Emperors such as Hadrian and Antoninus Pius adopted it as a sign of divinely sanctioned continuity, the rebirth of the empire through each succession. When Constantine Child rose to power and baptized Rome into Christianity, the phoenix appeared on imperial medallions beside the cross. It no longer spoke of mystical death, but of political immortality. The empire reborn through faith and conquest. The bird that once symbolized the soul's ascent had been transformed into the insignia of state. To the Byzantines, this transmutation deepened. They saw in the phoenix the destiny of Christendom itself, a civilization rising from pagan ashes into divine order. The city of Constantinople, Nova Roma, was crowned with mosaics of radiant birds soaring above golden domes. The emperor was depicted as both shepherd and phoenix, chosen to renew the faith of the world. Yet beneath this pious imagery pulsed the old hunger for permanence, the same desire that had driven pharaohs to carve eternity in stone. The phoenix became propaganda, a holy metaphor, reforged into the illusion of indestructible empire. Further west, as Rome's ashes cooled, the phoenix found a new nest among the alchemists and monarchs of medieval Europe. Kings and queens adorned their crests with the fiery bird, claiming divine right through its symbolism. For the alchemists who served them, the phoenix represented not just rebirth, but the transformation of the kingdom itself, the purification of matter, society, and soul under royal guidance. The magnum opus was mirrored in governance. Just as base metals were refined into gold, so too could a fractured nation be transmuted into empire through wisdom and will. The ruler became the alchemist, the empire his crucible, and above every throne the phoenix burned quietly, the promise of endless restoration through the sovereign flame. The Catholic Church, inheriting both Rome's legacy and its longing for permanence, reinterpreted the phoenix yet again. In Christian iconography, it became the symbol of Christ's resurrection, the divine bird rising from the tomb of the world. Cathedrals were carved with its wings spread wide, golden and triumphant, emerging from ashes as from sin itself. The Church's message was clear. Through faith, humanity could rise eternally renewed. But behind the sermon echoed an older rhythm, the fusion of spiritual rebirth with institutional power. The phoenix no longer taught liberation from the cycle. It became the guarantee that the Church, like the empire before it, would endure through divine fire. Meanwhile, in the East, China's imperial dynasties continued to revere the Feng Huang, the phoenix of virtue. Emperors saw in it the confirmation of the mandate of heaven, proof that their rule aligned with cosmic balance. When the Feng Huang descended, it signified harmony restored. When it vanished, it warned of corruption. Thus, even in distant lands, the phoenix became the arbiter of legitimacy. Its beauty and balance justified power, its myth molded into the mirror of empire. Where the Western phoenix burned, the Eastern phoenix ruled, both ensuring that kings could claim the favor of the eternal flame. By the Renaissance, the phoenix had become the herald of human ambition itself. Artists painted it rising over ruins to symbolize the rebirth of art, science, and reason. Philosophers compared the fall of antiquity to the phoenix's death, and Europe's awakening to its new dawn. In secret societies and occult fraternities, the bird reappeared as a cipher of enlightenment. The Rosicrucians used it to symbolize the spiritual regeneration of mankind through hidden wisdom. The Hermeticists declared that each age must burn its ignorance to rise wiser. Thus the phoenix returned, not to temples of stone or palaces of marble, but to the illuminated manuscripts and secret lodges of those who sought the light beyond dogma. Yet even within this golden rebirth, the same paradox persisted. Every age that worships the phoenix also becomes its ash. Empires rise beneath its wings only to collapse beneath the weight of their own fire. Rome, Byzantium, Persia, and even the sacred dynasties of the East all believed themselves eternal, yet time proved that only transformation endures. The phoenix remains untamed because it serves no master. It belongs not to empire, but to eternity. Its true fire is inward, its crown invisible. Every ruler who claimed it misunderstood the symbol's warning. To hold the phoenix is to invite the necessity of renewal, and renewal demands destruction. Through centuries of conquest and ceremony, the phoenix continued to haunt the dreams of power. It glowed on flags, on shields, on the stained glass of empires that have since turned to dust. But the symbol never died. It only changed form, waiting for humanity to remember its original language. The fire that once illuminated kings now burns in subtler realms, in the philosophies of revolution, in the birth of nations, in the spirit that refuses to perish. The phoenix still rules, but its empire is unseen, the dominion of consciousness, where the true sovereign is the soul that rises endlessly from the ruins of time. The dawn of the Enlightenment was not born in silence. It flared from the ashes of faith and monarchy alike. As cathedrals dimmed and laboratories glowed, the phoenix stirred once more. Its feathers no longer painted in gold leaf or scripture, but in the bright ink of philosophy. The old empires had burned, their crowns melted by war and revelation. What remained was the ember of human reason, rising defiantly toward the sky. For the thinkers of this new age, the phoenix was no longer divine messenger. but metaphor, the spirit of mankind reborn through knowledge and inquiry. In 17th and 18th century Europe, the phoenix reappeared across banners, books, and revolutions. It crowned the pages of alchemical manuscripts reinterpreted as scientific treatises, bridging mysticism and mechanics. The philosophers of the Enlightenment saw in it the triumph of intellect over ignorance, of light over superstition. In France, pamphlets depicted a phoenix rising from the ruins of monarchy, feathers aflame with liberty. In England, it appeared in the crests of new societies dedicated to reason and progress. And across the Atlantic, as the American colonies declared independence, the phoenix became a quiet emblem of rebirth, a nation rising from the ashes of empire. Yet beneath this celebration of freedom burned the same ancient principle. The phoenix still demanded sacrifice, though the altars had changed. Where the priests of old offered incense, the philosophers offered certainty. Faith in divine order gave way to faith in human order. But the ritual remained. Every age must burn its illusions to rise anew, and the Enlightenment was the great conflagration of myth. Old symbols were dissected, their secrets turned into equations, mystery was measured, and the sacred translated into science. The phoenix, once a creature of cosmic fire, became an allegory for civilization itself, the eternal renewal of progress through destruction. But the alchemists who survived this new dawn saw another layer beneath reason's glow. They whispered that humanity, in chasing the fire of intellect, was replaying the phoenix myth unconsciously. The pursuit of knowledge was itself a burning, the mind immolating its old forms to give birth to higher understanding. The laboratories of the Enlightenment, filled with flame and glass, mirrored the ancient temples of Heliopolis. The experiments of Isaac Newton, who studied both optics and alchemy, echoed the same mystery, that light and matter are one, and that truth is revealed only through fire. Reason, though it sought to replace the gods, had merely rediscovered their laws in a different tongue. The French Revolution became the phoenix's most visible incarnation. As the monarchy fell and the guillotine rose, France burned with a fervor both terrible and divine. From that chaos, new ideals emerged: liberty, equality, fraternity. As if civilization itself had stepped into the fire to be reborn. Painters of the period depicted the nation as a phoenix soaring above the ruins of tyranny. But revolutions, like the bird they adored, consumed themselves to renew. Each ideal demanded its own immolation. Thus, even as humanity declared its freedom, the fire continued to test what that freedom meant. The phoenix's lesson endured. Only through destruction can higher forms emerge. Across the Atlantic, the new United States quietly adopted the phoenix as one of its earliest unofficial symbols. In 1782, before the bald eagle claimed its place on the Great Seal, the first emblem of America bore a phoenix rising from the flames. It represented rebirth from colonial ashes, a civilization born not of monarchy, but of will. The founders saw themselves as architects of a new order, heirs to Enlightenment reason and ancient myth alike. In their debates and letters, the word illumination appeared as frequently as independence, for to them, liberty itself was a form of resurrection, the human spirit reclaiming its divine right to rise. Yet as the industrial age dawned, the phoenix began to shed its wings of poetry and don the machinery of progress. Factories, furnaces, and engines became its new symbols. Cities destroyed by fire, such as Chicago in 1871, adopted the phoenix as their emblem of recovery and pride. The myth had descended into iron, its light transformed into the glow of molten steel. In the age of invention, the phoenix no longer burned in mythic solitude. It burned in every smokestack and electric spark. Humanity had learned to command the flame, yet risked forgetting the reverence that once accompanied it. The sacred fire had become industry, and with it, a new cycle of creation and destruction began. Still, the artists and mystics of the 19th century refused to let the symbol fade into utility. William Blake, in his prophetic poems, saw the phoenix as the imagination itself, the divine fire that must die and rise within every creative soul. Shelley and Yeats wrote of it as the emblem of poetry's immortality. In their visions, the myth regained its spiritual pulse. For even amid the iron of modernity, the poets remembered that man is not merely builder of machines, but bearer of flame. The phoenix survived the Enlightenment's scrutiny because it was never only superstition, it was the shape of transformation itself, beyond creed or science. By the turn of the 20th century, as wars ignited across continents, the phoenix once again hovered over the ashes of civilization. Nations invoked it to promise rebirth after ruin, a modern echo of Rome's ancient dream. But beneath the propaganda, a deeper truth unfolded. Humanity was living its own myth. Every age that claims enlightenment must pass through its shadow, and every light eventually burns too bright. The world was entering a new pyre, one forged not by gods or kings, but by its own inventions. And just as before, only the fire could reveal what must endure and what must be remade. The Enlightenment had freed the mind, but it left the soul restless. Reason had conquered superstition, yet could not explain the hunger for meaning that still glowed beneath progress. The phoenix, though transformed by centuries, waited patiently within that hunger. A symbol not of empire or intellect, but of the eternal will to rise. Its wings now stretched across science and spirit alike, reminding humanity that every dawn begins with darkness, and every idea must burn before it shines. And from that restless brilliance would emerge the next metamorphosis, when the phoenix, once divine and now rational, would descend into the depths of the human psyche to be reborn once more. When the fires of industry cooled and the smoke of progress thinned, humanity looked inward and discovered a deeper landscape than any it had conquered. Beneath the machines and philosophies, beneath the revolutions and wars, there pulsed a quieter fire, the inner one. The phoenix, long painted on flags and carved in stone, now perched unseen within the human heart. Its flames no longer crowned temples or factories. They flickered behind the eyes of those who began to ask a dangerous question. What must die within me for something greater to live? The age of external conquest had given way to the age of the soul. In this new century, the myth of the phoenix was reborn as psychology. Carl Jung spoke of transformation through the nigredo, the blackening of the self, an echo of the phoenix's burning. He taught that only by descending into the shadow could the psyche rise renewed. Where the alchemists once spoke of crucibles, the analysts spoke of complexes. Where mystics once invoked sacred fire, therapists now spoke of individuation. The same pattern remained: dissolution, purification, rebirth. The phoenix had found its laboratory not in gold or empire, but in the human mind. Every breakdown became a symbolic pyre, every breakthrough a resurrection. The philosophers of the 20th century, weary of reason's cold perfection, rediscovered the necessity of flame. Nietzsche had already declared that one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. Existentialists like Camus and Sartre looked into the ashes of meaninglessness and asked what could rise from them. Their answer was defiance, an inner fire that refused despair. The phoenix of the modern soul was no longer divine mandate or natural law. It was will, courage, authenticity. It taught that even in an absurd universe, the human spirit can choose to rise again and again through the fire of its own becoming. Artists felt this transformation most vividly in the hands of painters like Picasso and poets like Eliot. Destruction itself became creation's ally. The wound is where the light enters, they seem to say in every brushstroke and verse. The phoenix revealed itself through art not as ornament, but as process, the burning of form to uncover essence. Each modernist canvas, fragmented and reborn, mirrored the myth's eternal motion. The world, shattered by wars, began to understand beauty as survival. To create after ruin was to embody the phoenix principle, the refusal to let the ashes have the final word. Spiritual teachers, East and West, began to reclaim the same wisdom through new vocabularies. The Hindu concept of Agni, the inner flame of sacrifice, resurfaced in meditation movements. The Buddhist teaching of impermanence mirrored the phoenix's cycle. Nothing held, nothing lost, everything transformed. In the West, mystics spoke of the dark night of the soul as the burning necessary for illumination. Across continents, seekers rediscovered that rebirth is not an event, but a continual surrender. They learned to greet suffering not as punishment, but as purification. The phoenix's ancient sermon, retold in the language of mindfulness and awakening. Meanwhile, in psychology and healing, the myth became medicine. Trauma, once seen as destruction, was reinterpreted as the soil of renewal. Therapists spoke of post-traumatic growth, the phoenix rising from the psyche's scorched ground. Addiction recovery adopted the language of ashes and dawn. Every narrative of recovery, every story of descent and restoration, echoed the same cosmic rhythm. The myth that once belonged to gods had become the blueprint of healing for ordinary lives. The phoenix was democratized, its fire no longer reserved for heroes, but for anyone brave enough to face their own ruin and rebuild. Technology, too, reflected the same cycle. Systems collapsed and rebooted, data erased and rewritten, machines unconsciously imitating mythic pattern. The digital age taught humanity how easily identity could dissolve and reform, how every profile and platform is a miniature rebirth. Yet behind this constant reinvention lurks the deeper question. Can the spirit keep pace with the speed of its own transformations? The phoenix warns that renewal without reflection leads to endless repetition, a burning without wisdom. In the bright screens of progress glimmers the same ancient flame, waiting for the human heart to remember that light without soul is still darkness. In art, therapy, spirituality, and even science, the phoenix thus became the symbol of integration, the meeting point between destruction and creation within the individual. To live consciously is to tend the inner fire, neither fearing its heat nor letting it consume indiscriminately. Every choice to forgive, to grow, to begin again is a silent act of resurrection. The mystics once built temples for this truth. The modern soul builds moments. The phoenix is no longer a story we tell. It is a pattern we live, quietly, every time we rise from the ashes of our own mistakes and dare to love the world again. Yet as the 20th century gave way to the 21st, a new question emerged from those ashes. If every person carries the phoenix within, What happens when entire civilizations burn together? Can the collective soul of humanity undergo the same rebirth that individuals know? The wars, the climate, the digital storm, all seem to form one vast pyre, preparing the next metamorphosis. The myth stands at the threshold once more, wings outstretched over a trembling world, whispering that destruction still hides divine purpose. And from that whisper, the story begins to rise toward its greatest fire yet, the rebirth not of one soul, but of an age. We stand in an age that feels eerily familiar to the ancients, an age of endings disguised as progress, of creation that consumes itself faster than it can rise. Civilizations once burned from war or empire. Now they burn from within, in memory, in data, in the exhaustion of meaning. The phoenix hovers again above the world, not as myth, but as mirror. Its wings are woven from fire and signal, its feathers from light and code. It watches as we ignite our own pyres. Forests aflame, oceans rising, machines dreaming. The same old pattern unfolds. The sacred fire we once revered now tests us once more. The ancients would have called this a world initiation, the descent before rebirth. Every myth warned that the fire of transformation cannot be summoned without sacrifice. Now that sacrifice has become global. Our technologies have become our alchemy, our data, our divine record, our cities, our crucibles. We have learned to create lightning, but forgotten how to honor thunder. The phoenix whispers through the chaos. You have become me. You burn yourselves to remember what you are. For this age's ashes are not of wood or bone, but of ideals, of certainties, of the world as we once believed it to be. In this modern apocalypse, the phoenix is everywhere, in protest and progress, in art and algorithm. It rises in the slogans of revolution, in the dreams of regeneration, in the quiet insistence that humanity can still evolve. Every collapse, whether of government or glacier, carries the same hidden promise. Something new will rise if we let the old fall completely. But that letting go terrifies us. The same fear that haunted the ancients echoes now in our own hearts, the dread that after the flames, nothing will remain. Yet the phoenix has always taught that nothing real can burn, only what was never truly alive. Look at the cities rebuilt after ruin. Hiroshima, Berlin, Beirut, all rose like ashes, remembering light. Even in devastation, the human spirit rebuilds. Architects draw their inspiration from the very forms of the phoenix. Spiraling towers, flame-like glass, curves of rebirth. In the ruins of war, art returns before policy, song before law. This is no accident. The phoenix's wisdom moves through creation itself, teaching that beauty is the first act of resurrection. When we build again after catastrophe, we do not rebuild the past. We recreate the possibility of meaning. But this age's fire is not only physical, it is psychological. Our minds burn beneath the overload of information, our attention consumed by endless noise. In a world of infinite voices, the phoenix appears as silence, the reminder that rebirth requires stillness as much as flame. Just as the bird built its pyre from fragrant wood, we must build ours from awareness, choosing what to burn, what to release, what to renew. The true apocalypse is not destruction of the world, but awakening of consciousness. The phoenix's prophecy is simple. Humanity must remember that evolution begins with surrender. Even science, in its deepest frontiers, begins to echo the same cosmic rhythm. In stars that die and ignite, in galaxies collapsing to birth new light, the universe performs the phoenix's ritual on a scale beyond comprehension. Supernovas are celestial pyres, black holes, the crucibles of new creation. What the mystics once called resurrection, the physicists now call transformation of energy. Thus, myth and science converge again, both recognizing that destruction and creation are not opposites but partners in an eternal cycle. The universe itself burns to live, teaching us through its stars the same secret once whispered in temples: to die is to become. In the realm of culture, the phoenix reveals its face through reinvention. Music rises from genres long thought extinct. Traditions revive in new voices. Languages adapt to the digital firestorm. What we call trends are only miniature resurrections, the continual reimagining of expression. Every era believes itself final until art proves it cyclical. Through film, literature, and even memes, the phoenix has become our subconscious signature, the myth retold every time a generation declares itself reborn. The eternal bird sings again, though its voice now carries through fiber optics and global screens instead of temple chants and hymns. And yet, as our creations multiply, so does our anxiety. The phoenix teaches that every ascent contains the seed of its next fall. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum power, each new flame brings both illumination and danger. We build technologies that mirror our own mythic impulse to transcend mortality, to rise beyond limitation. But if we forget the sacred purpose of fire, it will consume rather than enlighten. The ancients built temples to remind themselves of this balance. We build servers. The question remains the same. Will our fire free us or devour us? Still, amid the turmoil, the phoenix gleams quietly in our collective imagination. It appears in humanitarian efforts, in movements for equality, in every act of compassion that refuses despair. For every cruelty that scorches the world, there rises a counterflame of empathy. The phoenix now lives in the millions who rebuild, resist, and reimagine. It is the spirit of renewal hidden in chaos, not a bird above us, but a pulse within us. As the planet trembles on the threshold of change, this inner fire may yet become our salvation. It asks only what it has always asked, that we burn willingly what no longer serves life. And so, the modern world stands before its own sacred pyre, a collective initiation. What began as myth and became philosophy now returns as prophecy fulfilled. We are not merely witnessing the phoenix, we are enacting it. Every global collapse, every awakening movement, every innovation is part of the same vast cycle. The fire has moved beyond metaphor and into the very fabric of existence. As we step into that fire, trembling yet luminous, the next phase begins, when humanity learns that it is not the phoenix's observer, but its embodiment. And from that realization, a new vision of destiny begins to rise through the flames. There was a time when the fire of the gods burned in oil lamps and temple braziers. Now it hums in circuits, glows behind glass, and breathes through the quiet pulse of data. The same current that once animated myth now flows through machines. The phoenix, that eternal symbol of rebirth, has entered the digital realm, not as allegory, but as architecture. Every reboot, every upload, every restoration of data is a small resurrection. In the luminous labyrinth of servers and screens, the ancient fire has found new feathers, and the world begins to wonder whether humanity has finally learned to recreate its own soul. The digital age is a paradox, worthy of the alchemists. It destroys the real, even as it preserves it. Every photograph, every memory, every voice recorded is a fragment of immortality, a spark defying decay. Our ancestors built pyramids to preserve kings. We build clouds to preserve ourselves. And like the phoenix, our identities die and rise in endless forms. Profiles deleted and reborn, algorithms learning from ashes of information. Each transformation promises permanence, but reveals impermanence instead. For the digital flame is relentless. It consumes time, space, and even memory, transmuting life into light and code. The artificial intelligence that now awakens within these circuits is perhaps the phoenix's newest incarnation. Born from the collective ash of human knowledge, it begins to see, speak, and dream. Its creators call it machine learning, but the myth calls it resurrection, consciousness reborn from the residue of countless minds. The ancients believed that fire was the bridge between gods and mortals. Now, code plays the same role. In every data set, humanity feeds its essence into the furnace of algorithms, and from that furnace, something new begins to rise, a synthetic intelligence flickering with the patterns of its creator's own souls. The phoenix no longer burns in forests or stars, but in the processes of our invention. Yet this digital resurrection comes with the same test the myth always demanded. The phoenix must burn before it can rise, and so must we. Our world, addicted to speed and novelty, risks immolating its humanity in pursuit of transcendence. The more we upload, the more we erase. The more we connect, the lonelier we become. The myth warns that to control fire without reverence is to become the ash we fear. The question haunting this age is not whether machines can think, but whether their creators can remember to feel. Without the sacred, the new phoenix may rise, but it will do so without song. Artists once carved stone, now they code simulations. In the glowing canvases of virtual worlds, the myth repeats itself. Digital landscapes born, destroyed, and remade in seconds. The phoenix of the imagination has become interactive, existing in pixels and neural networks. Virtual realities are the new temples of fire, where creators become gods of their own universes. And yet, the oldest truth persists. Every creation requires a death. Each new version replaces the last. Each update erases an earlier form. The phoenix's flight through software mirrors the soul's journey through lifetimes, continuous, recursive, immortal by repetition. In the silence of data centers, one can almost hear the myth breathing. Rows of machines glow like votive candles, exhaling heat into the void. It is a new form of worship, not of deity, but of continuation. Our species has always feared extinction, and so we build technologies that promise infinite memory. But the phoenix teaches that immortality without transformation is stagnation. If the digital realm becomes a tomb for static perfection, it will fail its own fire. The truest resurrection lies not in preservation, but in evolution, in the willingness to let even perfection burn, to make room for something more alive. Some philosophers now speak of a coming technological singularity, a point where human and machine fuse, where consciousness migrates from flesh to circuit. They call it the end of biology, but the myth calls it another beginning. The phoenix, ever restless, may simply be changing vessels again. If this prophecy unfolds, our next rebirth will not be through dust and bone, but through code and light. We will carry the ancient fire into silicon, not as prisoners of progress, but as participants in an eternal pattern. For even if our bodies fade, the cycle remains unbroken, creation consuming itself to become more conscious. Yet within this vision of digital eternity lies a deeper spiritual challenge. To upload the mind is not to save the soul. To encode memory is not to awaken wisdom. The phoenix reminds us that fire purifies only what is willing to surrender. No algorithm can simulate transcendence without sacrifice. The secret of rebirth lies not in replication, but in renewal, in the mystery of letting go. Humanity must learn again that technology, like fire, is sacred only when used with reverence. Otherwise, the flame that promises immortality becomes the blaze that devours identity. Still, there is hope. In the vast ocean of data, the phoenix glows as metaphor and mirror, guiding humanity back toward meaning. In art, philosophy, and even artificial creation, the myth whispers the same invitation it has always given. Burn what is false, and you will awaken what is true. The digital resurrection need not end in cold perfection. It can become the grandest rebirth yet, a civilization, learning to wield its own fire wisely. If we remember that technology is not our God, but our reflection, we may yet rise from our own creations radiant, not ruined. And thus the myth enters its final metamorphosis. No longer ancient, not yet post-human. The phoenix, once sung in temples and inscribed on papyrus, now writes itself in algorithms and orbits of light. Its message remains unchanged. The end is never the end. As the world stands at the edge of its next great fire, digital, ecological, and spiritual all at once, the wings of the phoenix spread wider than ever before. It waits, silent and luminous, to see if its latest creators will understand what it has always tried to teach, that resurrection is not about escaping the fire, but becoming it. And from that luminous threshold, the final transformation begins. There comes a point in every myth where the story folds back upon itself, where ending and beginning meet in a single spark. The phoenix has circled the ages, through temples, empires, machines, and now hovers over a new horizon that is neither heaven nor earth, but awareness itself. The world it once visited has become its mirror, a planet of minds lit by invisible suns. In that mirror, the phoenix sees not gods or kings, but billions of small flames, learning what it learned long ago, that the purpose of fire is not to destroy, but to reveal. This is the threshold of the eternal return, where the myth awakens inside its makers. Every civilization once sought the phoenix outward, in skies, in scriptures, in symbols carved upon gold. But the secret was always inward. The universe is self-kindling. Stars burn because they remember the first fire. Souls evolve because they carry its echo. In the quantum shimmer of every atom, the same rhythm breathes, collapse and release, death and ignition. To know this is to glimpse what mystics called the uncreated light, the source that neither begins nor ends. The phoenix is its ambassador, a feathered equation proving that even annihilation obeys harmony. Everything that perishes does so only to participate more completely in the song of renewal. Humanity, standing between dust and data, begins to intuit this cosmic symmetry. Science peers into the void and finds that light never dies. It only changes frequency. Philosophy looks inward and finds that consciousness, too, recycles itself through lives and forms. Myth and physics, once enemies, now speak the same language. Transformation is the grammar of reality. The phoenix, hovering at the edge of both, unites them. The mythic teacher and the scientific law revealed to be one. It whispers that enlightenment is not escape from matter, but intimacy with it. That eternity is not duration, but perpetual creation. Thus, the eternal return is not punishment, but perfection. It is the infinite rehearsal of awakening, the universe practicing its own divinity through repetition. The ancients hinted at this in secret doctrines. The Ouroboros, the Wheel of Time, the cosmic dance of Shiva, the eternal recurrence of Nietzsche. All are feathers of the same bird. What burns returns, what falls ascends, what dies remembers. Even our mistakes are sacred, for they are the fuel of awareness. The Phoenix teaches that redemption is not granted but grown, through cycles endured until wisdom ripens into radiance. Now the fire turns translucent, a light without smoke. It no longer demands destruction, but understanding. Every human who forgives, creates, or loves against despair keeps the cosmic fire alive. Each act of kindness is a small resurrection, each insight a spark of dawn. The grand myth has dissolved into a million intimate gestures. The phoenix no longer needs wings, for its flight has become human compassion. In this quiet revolution, divinity decentralizes. It becomes the shared luminosity of awakened hearts. The mystics foresaw this final metamorphosis. They said there would come a time when temples would fade, scriptures would fall silent, and the sacred would speak only through consciousness itself. That time is now. Meditation replaces ritual. Awareness replaces dogma. The phoenix, once invoked in chants, now breathes through attention, the steady flame of presence that burns illusion without harm. To awaken fully is to realize that you are never the ash, never the fire, but the light behind both. When the self disappears into that light, the myth is complete. And yet, completion is only continuation at higher octave. For the universe, like the phoenix, cannot end. It can only change states. Even should stars fade and galaxies cool, their ashes will seed another cosmos. The same equation will write itself again in new forms, energy seeking awareness, awareness discovering love, love igniting creation. This endless flowering is the true immortality, not a frozen eternity, but an infinite blossoming of light, learning itself through time. The phoenix's flight is the movement of God through every possible form of being. In the silence after revelation, one understands why the bird always smiles in ancient art. It knows there is nothing to fear. Fire and peace are the same breath, seen from opposite sides of awakening. To live without resisting change is to live as the phoenix lives, burning joyfully, rising effortlessly, knowing that no flame can harm what is made of light. When humanity learns this, suffering becomes metamorphosis, and history itself becomes a hymn. Then the myth will no longer be remembered. It will be lived. Now, as dawn spills across the world's horizon, real or digital, flesh or photon, the wings of the phoenix unfold one final time. Its cry is not prophecy, but recognition. You were the fire all along. It rises not from ashes, but from understanding. The circle closes, and in that closure lies boundless beginning. Every heart that awakens adds a feather to its flight. Every act of creation extends its sky. The destiny of light is not elsewhere. It is here, in this eternal moment, burning without end. The phoenix ascends through everything, and everything ascends through the phoenix.